we're going to talk about some insider trading. So the reason why I'm talking about this, I want to circle back around to what Mike had briefly touched on in the joint podcast a couple of days ago when he was referring to Nancy Pelosi's insider trading. What he was talking about, for anybody who might still remember this, at the start of COVID, a couple of senators, namely like Kelly Loeffler, David Perdue, Dianne Feinstein, were all buying and selling stocks that directly correlated with how the COVID pandemic was going to affect the market, and they made just an absolute killing off of this, tens of millions of dollars. Right. Nobody was ever prosecuted. To my knowledge, everyone who's been up for re-election has been re-elected because that's our system and nobody will actually oppose corruption. But Nancy Pelosi appears to have been involved in this as well. My source for this, the one that Mike was referencing, is a new report from Glenn Greenwald. For anybody who's not familiar with who Glenn Greenwald is, that is a goddamn American patriot. Okay, this is the guy who went ahead and risked his entire career, even his physical safety, to get the news of the Edward Snowden NSA wiretapping leaks out to the public, right? And this really puts him as probably the most important journalist of the last 10 years. Now, is he perfect? No. A lot of his culture war takes are kind of cringe, but when it comes to exposing establishment corruption, he gets it right every time. He just hits it out of the park. He's a perfect resource for this. So a couple of things off of his new article. This is from the 15th, so about 5 days ago from the recording of this. And I quote, "Multiple times over the last several years, serious questions have been raised about stock positions taken by the Pelosis that turned out to be immensely profitable under suspicious circumstances. Perhaps the most disturbing was a report from Bloomberg News last Wednesday and another from days earlier by Fox Business that documented how Pelosi's husband purchased highly risky options in Google, Apple, and other tech companies back in February 2020. And I quote, "His option sales on Google alone netted him $5 million for the couple." Now, this is not the first time that investments made by Paul Pelosi have been in close proximity to happenings in Congress. Two of the most disturbing incidents. Paul Pelosi in March exercised $1.5 million worth of Microsoft call options, less than 2 weeks before the tech giant secured a $22 billion contract to supply U.S. Army combat troops with augmented reality headsets. In January, he purchased up to $1 million of Tesla calls before the Biden administration delivered its plans to provide incentives to promote the shift away from traditional automobiles and toward electric vehicles. You see the pattern here. In response to media inquiries, Pelosi denied that she is involved in or even has knowledge of her husband's stock trading. Bullshit. People believe this crap. Unbelievable. There is, of course, no way to confirm or disprove that. True. But what is clear is that the vast wealth generated by those stock trades in companies Pelosi greatly affects, about which she clearly has non-public information, facts, directly enriches Pelosi herself. Repeatedly, I might add. And she's not the only one. Now, to further expand on the topic of fake resistance, I tend to go after the squad for this one. Jimmy Dore does a great job of covering this as well. I'll just read off of here as well, more from Glenn. While AOC called on then Senator Kelly Loeffler to resign for having dumped stocks after receiving secret COVID briefings, at the same time that Fox News host Tucker Carlson said the same about Senator Richard Burr. Oh, okay, so there's more of these guys who did this. She has yet to comment on the repeated stock transactions in which the Pelosis have enriched themselves through companies directly within the purview of Speaker Pelosi's legislative power. Shocker. Shocker. It's unbelievable. And when we're talking about fake resistance here, again, usually what this involves is tweets that will call out someone like a Pelosi or a Chuck Schumer, usually on culture war things or on something to do with, maybe the stimulus check isn't big enough or something along those lines. But then anytime there's visible, obvious corruption that anybody, an eighth grader, can call bullshit on, she's absolutely silent. So is the rest of the squad. Rashida Tlaib, in my opinion, is the only member of the squad, by the way, who has any redeeming qualities whatsoever. That's a different topic for a different time. Just long and short of it being, she occasionally actually backs up what her tweets say. Right? Occasionally. It's a low bar for her. But this is what we have. And so I just wanted to reiterate all these points from Glenn, kind of flesh out what Mike was talking about because I've gotten some questions on that. Just wanted to make sure that everybody's aware of this. For anybody who wants to read the full article here, you can go to Glenn Greenwald's Substack, and it's from the 15th. Read up on the whole thing. There's a little bit more in here that I didn't have time to get into, but I just want to make sure everybody's aware of what's going on. We're not talking out of our asses on this. It's documented stuff. Glenn Greenwald, again, probably the best source when we're talking about government corruption. The establishment, it appears, has not been able to get to him at a time when so many other people have fallen to the money games. TYT being a perfect example of this, the Young Turks. Again, different conversation for a different day. But I highly recommend you read up on this. If there's any other questions, feel free to message me. I'll see what information I can get you on whatever questions you might still have. But again, it's time to stop defending obvious corruption from the Pelosi's and Schumer's and McConnell's of the world. They're all the same. Again, it's one big party. You're not in it, to quote George Carlin. And, as Mike always does, to quote Harry Truman, nobody gets rich in politics except for criminals. I'm paraphrasing, but that's the quote. And it's true then, it's true now.